The Trevi Fountain is a must-see on any visit to Rome, and millions of tourists go every year to throw a coin over their shoulder, to bring good fortune, and to secure the blessing of the fates, so that one day they may return to the eternal city. Municipal workers collect the coins every evening and sort them according to national origin. The $1.5 million collected every year from the fountain is then used to fund conservation efforts in the city, as well as welfare programs for Roman residents. The origins of this specific tradition are unknown, but can be traced to the wishing wells that were prevalent throughout antiquity. Rome may no longer command a continent-spanning empire or serve as the hub for global commerce, but it is fitting that millions of people drop coins from across the world into a fountain which draws water from an aqueduct which was originally built in 19 BC. The fountains and springs in ancient Rome doubtless resembled the bottom of the modern Trevi Fountain, as the people of Rome made small sacrifices to the local gods in the hopes of receiving a divine favor. Perhaps they would have been a bit more hesitant to depart with their coins if they knew how valuable they could become someday. For example, the record for the most expensive ancient coin belongs to a gold piece that was struck by Brutus in 42 BC to pay troops that he had raised for his campaign against Antony and Octavian. Celebrating Caesar's assassination, this Ides of March coin sold for nearly $4.2 million in 2020. The high asking price is a result of its rarity. Only 3 gold coins like it have ever been identified, as well as the historical event which it commemorates. But the average Roman wasn't walking around with millions of dollars in his coin purse. So how did money work in the classical Mediterranean? During the monarchy and early republic, the vast majority of Romans in the modest city-state had no need for money, as bartering was used to supply anything that they could not grow, craft, or breed themselves. Even among the richest Romans of this early period, foreign trade was minimal outside of a few dedicated businessmen. However, if universal currency was needed for significant purchases, such as an ox, a plow, a field, or the dowry of a young daughter, then metal bars of copper or bronze were used. The government made official payments using unclaimed masses of bronze, known as aes rude, and cast bronze ingots, aes signatum. In fact, aes, the Latin word for bronze, would remain the colloquial term for money, showing that bronze always remained important within the Roman monetary system. However, as the city grew in wealth, prestige, and power, labor became more specialized, and the appetite for luxuries that could not be produced within the home increased. We can trace the emergence of the first recognizable coins to roughly 300 BC. 3 distinct coins entered circulation at this date. They were the as, a large coin weighing about 10 ounces, the simis, which was half the size of the as, and the unica, which was only 1/12 the size of the as. The final coin is the most intriguing, because it shows that the early Romans relied on a base 12 number system for their money instead of the base 10 that we use today. In a society where even divisions by 3 and 4 had to be made, without the help of decimals, this was the logical choice. This system allowed for commerce during the days of early expansion, but collapsed along with the Roman economy itself during the Second Punic War. Hannibal spending the better part of 2 decades raising the Italian countryside was bad enough, but the pressures of war drastically increased the need for bronze, for use in weapons and armor by the insatiable Roman war machine. In the aftermath of their victory, the Romans were forced to rebuild their entire agricultural base, but they also had to adjust to their newfound hegemony over the entire Mediterranean. With Mediterranean trade no longer dominated by the Carthaginians, Romans began to grow fantastically richer than their fathers, while the new economy became exponentially more complex. Banking and finance became a major industry to supply investment across the Republic's burgeoning empire, and it was in 200 BC, only 2 years after the defeat of Carthage, that the bronze as was replaced as the Republic's standard unit of currency by a new silver coin called the Denarius. Though its values would fluctuate over the centuries in which it was in use, this denomination would prove to have incredible staying power, and it is the coin that is mentioned throughout the New Testament whenever money comes into play. After the introduction of the denarius, currency was altered again in 123 BC. after which commerce primarily took place using the sesterces, which was also struck in silver, but was smaller than the denarius and only amounted to 1/4 of its value. The final coin to be introduced during the Republic was the aureus. Struck in gold, this coin was worth 25 denarii, and was somewhat rare until the days of Julius Caesar, after which it became more and more common. These remained the coins in use during the heyday of the empire, and new units would not be introduced until the crisis of the 3rd century forced a reimagining of the Roman economy. The crisis of the 3rd century was not driven by economic factors, but short-sighted economic policies contributed to the unrest and prolonged it. As the economic climate worsened, mints began putting less precious metal into coins as part of a practice known as debasement. This increased inflation and created a feedback loop, where old money was prioritized over new coins and kept tucked away so that it would never enter circulation. Diocletian issued edicts as part of his attempts to stabilize the currency, more on this later, but the crisis wasn't resolved until Constantine revalued currency and issued the solid gold solidus. So what were these coins worth in modern terms? It's difficult to provide an accurate comparison, given the vast differences in social norms, economic practice, and the modes of production that dominated in classical antiquity, so the best we can do is discuss the relative buying power of Roman currency. Scholars estimate that in the late Republic, a family in urban Rome required roughly 250 denarii per year to survive at the subsistence level. Still, Caesar was able to earn the undying loyalty of his soldiers by providing an annual salary of 225 denarii to the veterans of his Gallic campaigns. Other professions were not so well compensated. Horace, the leading poet of the late Republic, tells us that his father refused to pay the 8 asses per month that the teachers required for tuition. If we extrapolate out, we can calculate that a teacher would have required 30 pupils to earn 15 denarii a month, or 180 per year. Hardly a lucrative profession, but tales abound of Roman educators living in abject poverty, so this isn't surprising. Among Rome's exploited classes, data on earnings is harder to come by. Cicero's letters tell us that he believed a skilled slave could earn up to 3/4 of a denarius by working on one of their off days, and the New Testament writers refer to a denarius as a day's wages for workers in 1st century Palestine. The 4th century Edict of Diocletian offers insight into the economy at a time of crisis. In response to terrible economic shocks and runaway inflation, Diocletian attempted to reform every aspect of the Roman economy, including coinage. Far from an attempt at guaranteeing standards of living, the initiative was driven by the need to levy new taxes on his rapidly collapsing empire. However, the problem of debasement persisted, and future reforms proved necessary to provide the empire with the same level of economic stability that Diocletian's invention of the tetrarchy had brought to politics. Though it is popular to criticize the price-setting aspects of this legislation as a failed attempt at populism that was doomed to fail because Romans lacked the economic sophistication that modern free market zealots claim to possess, one must remember that his edict also froze wages in addition to setting prices. It's strange how this aspect, targeting the bargaining power of the common man, is often elided over. Setting wage limits for skilled laborers, Diocletian decreed that a wide variety of workers, including carpenters, masons, sewer cleaners, and even shepherds, were to be compensated only within the very narrow range of just 200 to 400 sesterces per day. Another problem with the prevailing pro-laissez-faire interpretation of Diocletian's economic policies is that scholars believe that the incredibly harsh punishments detailed for any deviation from the standardized price controls outlined in the edict indicates that it was likely not enforced with any regularity. Instead, it turned into an instrument that curtailed wages, but lax enforcement allowed prices to continue climbing. Another useful tool for discovering the practical value of money can be seen in the enrollment standards for legions. Until Marius, the Republic's army only accepted propertied individuals for service. The qualifications reached their nadir during the Second Punic War in response to Hannibal's continued victories, and those with wealth amounting to just 400 denarii were able to join. Though not a one-to-one comparison, real estate information from around 60 of the Common Era tell us that this amount would only be enough for an acre of arable land, far too little to support an individual, let alone a family. Finally, we can also examine the wealth required for enrollment in the equestrian order. By the standards of Rome's richest men, qualification for equestrian status in the late Republic was not terribly high. We can deduce a rough annual income for someone at the low end of the equestrian order at around 5,000 denarii a year. Far and away more than the average Roman could hope to see, yet still far below the 25,000 denarii a year that Cicero considered necessary to live a dignified and cultured life. However, it's hard to gauge exactly what wealth distribution looked like among the equestrian order, and doubtless the wealthiest of this class surpassed poorer senators in their holdings, though not in social prestige. Still, almost all the richest Romans of the Republican era, whose fortunes can be determined with any degree of accuracy, were senators. Crassus was a kingmaker with his vast fortune, which was said to amount to 200 million sesterces, or 50 million denarii. That would go down as the largest fortune ever earned primarily through commerce, and would only be surpassed by the fortunes that his fellow triumvirs, Pompey and Caesar, amassed, though these were each almost entirely built through conquest, enslavement, and the plundering of foreign domains. Though they are coveted by collectors and even treated as an investment by some today, the primary value of Roman coins is in what they can tell us about the society. The figures and inscriptions etched into them offer a fascinating peek at the shifting ideological boundaries of Roman society, from republic to empire and from paganism to Christianity. The propaganda value of Roman coins was tremendous in a mostly illiterate society, and I'll be coming back to this topic in a later video. Also of interest is what the locations where the coins are discovered tells us about the strength of Roman trade networks and the value of Roman coins as currency outside the empire in places like Scandinavia and even India. The content of each coin provides a window into the economic climate, with the levels of debasement indicating the strength of the economy at that given time. I only hope that the person who bought Brutus's Ides of March coin appreciates all that these artifacts can tell us, and that the piece ends up in a museum where it can be cherished by all, and not in a private collection gathering dust.